gentlemen. Welcome to the City Council special meeting this Monday evening, October 7th. I now call this meeting to order. City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Certainly, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Hedges.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Lorraine.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Newsom.
Here.
And Mayor Diaz-Nash.
Here. We are excited to be here in person with options for those who choose not to be here in person to participate virtually. There are several ways to participate. For those attending in person, please complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the city clerk. If participating remotely, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom and you will be called on at the appropriate time. Calling in via phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, please press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for each specific item. We will begin tonight's special meeting with one closed session item. Item number 1, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. Now, before we convene to closed session, City Clerk, do we have any requests to speak on those items?
Madam Mayor, we have not received any requests to speak on this item.
All right, well then let's convene to closed session in conference room C. All right, thank you very much. We're back in the special session and city attorney has an announcement to make.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to announce that in closed session, the city council on a 3-2 vote with council members Hedges and Lorraine voting no, authorized the initiation of litigation in one case, the particulars of which will be made publicly available at a later date after litigation is commenced pursuant to state law.
Thank you very much. All right, we will now move on to our second item in the study session.
Madam Mayor, just before we do so, if I, just through the mayor, we have unfortunately some technical issues that we're experiencing in council chambers, which is preventing us from streaming the meeting directly to YouTube. However, remote participation is still available via Zoom. Attendees can join via Zoom, and we are recording the meeting. We'll make that available on YouTube after the meeting.
Great, and then we'll make that announcement before the regular session if the problem continues.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other special announcements that we want to make before we continue? Okay. Sure.
So for those of you that have not participated on Zoom before, you go to the city's website, go to the meeting agendas and minutes part of the meeting and scroll down, and that's where you'll find the link for Zoom.
Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to number 2, discussion and adoption of strategic planning process for the city council. We have Christina Horsberger, Assistant City Manager, making a presentation. Thank you very much.
Your patience is appreciated.
You're just getting people excited for the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. Thank you for your patience while we got started. So before you tonight, we have the strategic planning process for the city of San Mateo. And we are requesting city council direction on whether the city council wants to incorporate a robust strategic planning process into the annual budget process, starting with fiscal year 26-27. Whether the council wants to develop a strategic plan during an offsite workshop in February of 2025, and whether council would like to continue the Blue Sky Goal Setting Workshop to include key council projects identified in the strategic plan in the fiscal year 26-27 annual budget process. So as you all know, and for any listeners who are tuning in tonight, the current annual process for goal setting entails starting off in January or February with our Blue Sky Goal Setting Workshop, where we gather initial public input, identify city council priorities, and announce major departmental initiatives. There's no budget or resource framework associated with this goal setting meeting. And that happens later in the year in March and April when we return to City Council with preliminary budget numbers and resource needs that are associated with the goals that are identified at that January or February meeting. We then return again in April or May with a finalized budget and with the goals finalized after we've made any adjustments that had been directed in March or April. And then those are incorporated into our final budget that is adopted by council in June. And so for the strategic plan that is before you tonight, if we should move forward with it, it would include a mission statement that would provide a guiding benchmark for council decisions, overarching strategic initiatives that would have long-term concerns and interests of the city. It would identify strategic priorities, which would be key initiatives that would inform decisions over the coming years and be reviewed annually. It would include goals, which would have high-level outcomes related to the strategic priorities. And the goals would typically include 2 to 4 per priority, and then have activities that would be identified each year. And those would sort of be akin to the priorities that are set each year right now at the goal setting process. And then staff would report back at regular intervals to council on the progress of the activities and the outcomes. And that would be sort of akin to the mid-year goal updates that you receive now. And so with the proposed process, the direction to proceed with the concept and framework, the council would approve the overall strategic plan and process if you agree that that's something we should move forward on. The plan to develop and approve would take place, and the overall forming of the strategic plan would happen at a workshop in February of 2025. The workshop would be facilitated by a consultant. The resources would include general plan categories, so I should rephrase that. The resources that we would provide to the city council as a basis to identify the strategic initiatives, policies, and goals would include things like the general plan, the community conversations that are taking place right now, and the summaries that come out of that, the community survey results. We do community surveys every couple of years, and we're due for one now. And some of the other outreach endeavors that we're working on now to inform the strategic planning process. And so with that, our initial thought was to go back then and draft the document after we had received that information at the workshop and then return later in the year. We had received some questions as to whether or not we would return in fall or it would be possible to come back earlier. We could come back earlier and do it all at one time if that was desired by council. So I just wanted to go ahead and put that out there. This would not interfere with the regular Blue Skies goal setting for the next calendar year. That would still take place as normal. And so these could be concurrent processes where the strategic planning was taking place. We would do the Blue Skies just like normal. And so they could be concurrent. And then the idea would be that we would do the activities as set by the strategic plan during the next year. And so this would be getting us all set up for the year that follows. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear. This would not interfere. It would be concurrent. And so this would be sort of a complementary process for this year to get us thinking about the things that we want to be ready for in the following year. And that brings us back to our initial question. Does the city council want to embark on a strategic plan that would help to inform the annual budget process and the goal setting? Does the city council want to do that in an offsite workshop in February of 2025 and then continue with the Blue Sky goal setting workshop and include key council projects identified in the plan in the fiscal year 26-27 annual budget process? And thank you, and we're ready for questions.
Thank you very much. And City Clerk, do we have any requests for public comment?
No requests to see received in person. For our folks attending virtually, if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand now. And Madam Mayor, we have not received any requests to speak on this item.
Okay, then I will bring it back, close public comment on this item, bring it back to council. Who would like to start off with comments? Councilmember Lee.
Well, I'm certainly interested in this idea to the extent that it can help align the community input and our own council priority setting process with our overarching master planning and budgeting process. And do so in a way that is synced with our budget capacity and our staff capacity. So that is certainly where I think we all want to aim for. My main input is that I hope that we can consider designing this strategic planning process in a way that is highly leveraging and framing goals around our 250-page general plan approved documents. So we have worked for 7 years, 7+ years to get this master plan approved. And I want to bring everyone back into focus that we spent years literally developing a vision and our values, our stated values that were approved, right, by multiple councils and community input processes. And we have numerous stated goals and goals under those sub policies. And I'll just take a moment. I want to read one. This is just one on page 45. Okay. Under the land use policy, goal LU-1, plan carefully for balanced growth that provides ample housing that is affordable at all levels and job opportunities for all community members. Maximize efficient use of infrastructure, limits adverse impacts to the environment, and improves social, economic, environmental, and health equity. And then the sub-policy under that one is equitable development. Prioritize development projects that meet social and economic needs of the economically vulnerable populations to address and reverse the underlying socioeconomic factors in the community that contribute to residential and social segregation in the city. Provide a range of housing types, sizes, and affordability levels in all San Mateo neighborhoods. This is just one of our existing and adopted policies. And so while I support this process, I want to express my hope and also my concern that this process could, in fact, encroach on and in some, potentially conflict with our implementation of the general plan policies that we've already adopted. And so I want to just be the voice of caution in the room 5 years into this job, having seen many a beautiful plan hit the shelf, get adopted, and never get implemented. And I really, while I love strategic planning and strategic thinking, and I've put a lot of energy and effort and support into helping and encouraging, I think, a discernment and collating our plans and finding inconsistencies and trying to reconcile those into this 250-page document. Again, I hope that staff, I would like to hear, honestly, staff's perspective and your approach in terms of how you will manage that risk, right? And heading down this path. What are the proactive steps that you're taking? Have you already identified that is potentially a concern, that that our strategic planning process and then our goals, our Blue Skies goal setting process might actually be in competition with and supplanting some of our general plan implementation?
So I think the goal is that the general plan provides a foundation or sort of a launch pad for the strategic planning. And I think that when the initiatives are identified, that is really up to the city council to look to the general plan. And then I think the other outreach items like the San Mateo community conversations and the community survey will help to hone in on which of the parts of the general plan the council might want to focus on first. And I'll give for instance, on how the strategic plan might help with the implementation of the general plan, as opposed to conflicting with it. So the general plan has 56 goals, 366 policies, and 194 actions. And those actions are general because it's a general plan, whereas the activities that we do through the goal setting process are really specific. And so 366 policies is a lot, and 56 goals, that's a lot. But if you can narrow it down through the strategic plan using the general plan as your basis, then I think the idea here is that you focus it in and it gives you a way to implement the general plan in bite-sized chunks. And then you treat the strategic plan as a living document. And every year when you look at it, you can also revise it and you can direct changes. And because it's not a binding document like the general plan, you can modify it. And we don't have to go through a whole legislative process to modify the strategic plan like we do the general plan. And this plan helps inform the budget, and the budget informs this plan. And every year we're looking at it in a way that's mutually beneficial so that the decisions are practical and you don't have to take 4 months to figure out if you can actually implement the goals that you want to direct staff to work on, because you're looking at the things together concurrently at the same time. And so I do really think of it more as complementary more than competing.
I mean, I certainly hope so. And I think that I would just to put a very explicit pin on it, I think it would be wise to direct this process and provide guidance in this process for council to look at the action items and think about the action items helping to inform the work plan for the next fiscal year, right? So that it's deeply aligned with what, with the goals that have already been and the policies that have already been adopted. So that's just my, that's my words of caution and, and also support for this process. And then I think just for the community survey, I'm excited to see us go through that process again. I think it would be beneficial now that we'll have three different data sets of community surveys to go off of. I would love to see that data presented back to us in the form of benchmarks and trends, so that we're actually not just looking at a snapshot in time, but learning about the community's perceptions and needs in a more global sense, and to identify patterns. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hedges.
Very much in agreement with Councilmember Lee on most of the things she brought up. I would say that my view of a general plan is it is the general long-term view of how our city develops. It's a roadmap. And a strategic plan, in my view, will help us nail that down into actual actions that complement the general plan. I understand her concern, and things can certainly run off the rails along the way. But I think we're on the right track here. And just another analogy would be that in land use, we don't dictate exactly what's going to be built. We set the parameters. And I think that's what the general plan does, and our strategic plan will set the particulars. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lorraine.
Thank you, through the mayor. Christina, thank you for your presentation. I think you touched on a bit of outreach the city will end up conducting with the public as part of this process in the form of the community conversations that you said are ongoing, and the survey that we will now have been taking every 2 years and will continue at this time. I guess given that it sounds like we will be looking at touching on this annually, do you have a sense of how the public can contribute to this process annually? Will there, for example, be community conversations sort of in advance each year, or are there other ways the public might be able to contribute beyond like showing up to a public meeting like our Blue Sky session?
I think that we hear from the community throughout the year as we go about our business and as we do our policy development. And they are invited to all of our annual workshops and to our goal setting meetings. And so I think we do hear from them through our goal setting, and we are always listening to our community as we move through all of our policy making throughout the year and through our boards and commissions. And so I think through that, like through those channels we do. For this particular first year, there's the two things that I mentioned. We're also doing pop-ups to ask questions of the community at all of our community events right now. And so that's another piece of what we're doing. And so I would also add that in there. And we do those things throughout the year. And then I would also just mention that since we are basing it on the general plan, we just did 6 years of outreach on that. And so that's forming the basis. But in terms of every year going forward, we don't have that plan now, but I think that if that's something that the council wants to see, that's something you guys can direct us to build into the strategic plan. So if you wanted us to have some kind of a pre-meeting or build in some kind of an outreach strategy for that, aside from the community surveys, which generally happen every 2 years, then we could do something like that.
So I just want to jump in here and say that kind of the goal with the strategic plan is that it's going to be dynamic, not static. So it's going to be constantly, it's a, living, breathing document that will continually check in at least once annually with the council to see if there are tweaks that need to be made. The goal is that the strategic plan really aligns with the values, not only of this council, but this organization, and most importantly, this community. And so when you go out and you engage a community, I know that right now there's campaign season. When you're knocking on doors, you're going to hear the most from your community as to what their priorities are. And I could say probably if you go and if you're really in tune with the community and engaging, I bet housing and homelessness, transportation, sustainability are all top of mind issues that you'll hear from your San Mateo residents currently. But we'll continue, if we're really doing it right, you'll see, and we'll discuss as a council on an annual basis as part of that mid-year kind of budget preparation process. You might have, 9 different strategic priorities. These are kind of the long term. And then you'll have strategic initiatives, which are the mid and short term portion of what we are looking at. But what we would be doing is you might focus on maybe 3 of those top 9 strategic initiatives for that given year based off of the feedback that we're hearing, not only from the surveys that we do every 2 years, but also we hear directly, and we try to have a 2-way communication, and we're really trying to build a robust apparatus of communication and engagement on all our major initiatives. And yes, we'll engage on one specific initiative overall or a policy, but that means they start bringing, residents will tell you about everything else that's going on within 300 feet of their house or their neighborhood or within the city at the same time. And so staff is taking mental note, and all that stuff actually comes back because we talk about all this internally. And so there's a way of this 2-way kind of conduit with the community to be able to make those changes. And the council at any time can also ask staff to, bring it up and discuss. And I just on the general plan piece of it, just want to say that this strategic plan must align with our general plan. It's a must. It's not a may, it's a must. It has to align there, with our overall plan, with the policies. And it kind of going back to what Assistant City Manager Horsberg said, really needs to be in alignment with that. And so it's of utmost importance that we have that.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. I'll just give a comment or two to wrap up here and note that firstly, I support 1, 2, and 3. And I agree with much of what my council colleagues have said so far and in comments. For example, that the general plan is the foundation. And I think But I think those comments are helpful to highlight, because right now this council, for example, has and staff are all steeped in general plan as we just went through the process. But 10 years from now, it may not feel so resonant, and yet we will still be working on implementing a lot of what we agreed at this time. And it's still important that we do so, and that we review and reflect as a council on that as we think about blue sky things we may wish to bring forth into this integrated process. And I think it is, I would submit that part of the idea behind this seems to me to be to ensure that those blue sky asks are better integrated with the general plan and what the city is focusing on through community input and so on. As currently, we are allowed to come up and bring things, and they may be well informed, and or they might have come from something that isn't as well integrated. That said, I look forward to this. I think this will help. And I think based on what we were just talking about with community outreach, I feel confident that indeed we are getting many flavors of input throughout the year on a number of topics that are relevant. And so perhaps as we get to, close to the period during which we would engage in a blue sky or strategic planning session, if staff could please give us some kind of summary of what staff had maybe looked at, what you were just mentioning, and if it had recommendations on considering activities to highlight or even strategic initiatives based on that might be different from what was focused on the previous year, along with a packet of some evidence that we could flip through for reference. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Well, first off, thank you to all my colleagues for all the great questions, because it left me with, excuse me, better? Usually you guys don't even need a mic to hear me. I would say, first off, thank you to my colleagues, because you guys asked great questions, and I feel like there's not a lot of questions left to ask. One thing I've learned in the last 2 years of being on the council is that, the general plan has these long-term goals, and they're generally overarching, and people are always concerned about housing, for example. That's not something that's ever probably going to go away. And then we have things that come up regularly over the course of the year that are, blips, first it's flooding, and then it's cell towers and small cell towers, and then it's train noise. And these are always things that we're always going to have to be bubbling up to the surface, because they're the issue in the moment. I would suggest that when we have our blue sky, so I support all three of these, and I thank you for the presentation. I would suggest that when we do our blue sky initiatives, that we try to, if possible, get them to you sooner, so that staff has time to come back and say, these are the people's blue skies initiatives, and they present or point directly to these 56 goals, these of the 56 goals, or these of the 366 policies, et cetera, just so that we can then see, are there things that we might be missing that we should be, kind of sure that we're working on everything. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, that was it. Like, went out with a scratch. So that would be, one suggestion is if we could try to make sure that after we presented our initiatives, but before we had the blue sky, if we could try to look at it overarchingly to see, which of the goals and policies and action items do these point back to, and are we missing any? Just so that we make sure that we're constantly working on everything. And, implement, there's always going to be certain things we'll be working on faster and other things that we're going to defer for a year or two, and that'll be happening for a decade. But just to make sure that we're constantly aware and moving everything forward. But that said, thank you for a great presentation, and I support all three.
Excellent. Well, I will make it unanimous in terms of support. And just to say that I don't know, I mean, given my background in business, I don't know how to operate without this strategic plan process. I mean, this is what I've been actually looking for a while. So I think it's great that staff is recommending this. Absolutely, it should be a robust plan into the budget process. And as I think many of my colleagues have said, it's a focus and a forcing function. How we can go out and talk about the general plan, and Councilmember Lee is very right to say we've got all these goals and actions and things we want to do, but where do you dive in first, and how do you sequence it, and how do you explain it to people? And what I've always found in strategic plans that include the vision and the values is here's what our council believes in, here's what our city believes in, and here's how we're going to spend our efforts this year trying to advance whatever that is. So it's a great communication vehicle as well. A couple things that I have seen or I'm used to doing, and I don't know how they would translate into a local government strategic planning process, but there always is an environmental assessment. And we did a huge environmental assessment as part of our general plan. So there's probably a lot that we can take from that as a context setting for our strategic planning initiative. We don't have to redo unless something very big has happened to change the environment. But just if somebody reads that plan, they don't need to have gone through the general plan process. They can read the document and say, okay, here is the environment that they're working in. And that helps me understand why they've chosen these goals and these initiatives. And secondly, I always work with a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And in a business world, you might talk about competition being the other company down the street that's producing the same kind of widgets you do. But there's a way of looking at it from, what are our strengths as a city, as an organization? Where are the things that we really want to work on? Like hiring and retention and all that, we always talk about as something that's a priority, but also there are gaps. So how does that play into that analysis? Where are the opportunities that San Mateo has that other cities, other governments might not? The fact that we are the largest, that we are at the intersection of really the Bay Area, that's a huge opportunity for us. And then what are threats? It could be climate change. It could be the fact that we are running a $250 million gap in our pension. That's the issue. And what does that do for how we operate? I'm not trying to prescribe what it should be, but I think it really is another focus and function that we should think about. How do we do that in our general plan and not just dive straight into the goals and the initiatives? And all those are great and are important, but it's that context setting that I think will be a good exercise and also very helpful for people trying to understand. So other than that, I can't wait to get going. And I love the fact that we are doing sort of a transitional year because we have to go through the process, but we have to still keep moving the train ahead and then have that transitional year dovetail into the strategic plan. So thank you. Yes, Councilmember Lorraine.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I just wanted to thank the deputy mayor for his comment about timing and receiving a bit of information from staff related to, current goals, activities, et cetera, and how they interact with Blue Sky Asks. Because I am one of those folks who asked the question about whether we might be able to time it such that council can have some information to help them look for those sort of gaps when considering their Blue Sky Asks. And so, and in general, I support a timeline that allows for that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. City Manager. Did you want to say something, Councilmember Lee?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I think that's a really concrete ask that I also support, is having staff provide sort of like a mapping or an analysis of what council has suggested and how that ties into the existing general plan goals or other master planning goals. And that will ensure that there is like a foundation of context to frame the, some of the trade-offs that might be necessary in, the bartering of the goals and, and if I think having to pare down and, because I think they're only going to get 3, right, moving forward. So, and then I guess I just wanted to just double back on, like, I hope that the strategic planning process can be light and agile and that we can rely on the existing data set that we will have and the existing community input processes that we have. If we are layering more and more community input evaluation processes, like there's a risk of becoming, entrapped in analysis paralysis, right? We have real city business and community needs that need to be addressed, and we have limited time and capacity. And so I don't want our processes to overtake the very real need to implement change. We need to resource the changes that requires time and resources and money. So I just, again, I really hope that this process can be supported through this council with that in mind.
Great, thank you. And City Manager, did you want to say something?
I think we have direction from the council, so appreciate it.
Okay, great. Oh, Councilmember Hedges.
I want to thank Rob as well. And I think it's great that we recognized his comments.
There you go, congratulations.
But,
Mayor?
but I just wanted to clarify for you, I really thank you for this because I came tonight concerned about what the strategic plan process would do to the Blue Skies process. And you've really clarified it that they augment one another. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So I think we can adjourn now until 7 o'clock in our regular session.
Yes. Yes.